What is the best way ancient people could record a message that could stand the test of time? A message even generations far into the future could read. There's one ancient ruler that might have figured that out. Let's look at some of the ways ancient people recorded messages. One way is through oral traditions. Some ancient people didn't bother to write things down. They would just memorize the stories and then tell it to someone else to memorize. This method works, but over time can get lost in translation, lose details, or later generations may not have a full understanding of the context of the stories as the original storytellers understood it in their own time. Later generations may not even realize they aren't telling the story correctly anymore, and would have no way to verify anything if nothing was ever written down. Writing things down on paper or parchment makes it easier to remember because you don't necessarily have to remember all the details. You can also go back to the written source to verify details. Scribes can make copies of the stories and keep the original story intact. The problem with paper and parchment, though, is it deteriorates over time. It's very susceptible to burning or getting wet and becoming unreadable or falling apart. Chiseling something in stone is better than writing things down on paper because stone will last longer. But even that's not perfect. Stone can be chiseled over or broken or just lost. Think of Göbekli Tepe. The builders of Göbekli Tepe carved images into their standing stones, but they were buried for many thousands of years and no one knows the meaning of their carvings anymore. Some people have tried to interpret them and they may represent astronomical figures, but no one really knows for sure what all the images mean. The Rosetta Stone, found in Egypt in 1799, was a great find because it was useful in translating two languages that people had long forgot how to read. The Greek written on it, which was still understood in 1799, was used to translate the Egyptian hieroglyphs and Demotic text on the stone. Once scholars knew how to read Egyptian hieroglyphs, they were able to read other ancient Egyptian texts. What is even better than a stone with a message written in multiple languages? How about a mountain with a message written in multiple languages? That is what Mount Behistun in Iran is. The Behistun inscription is a large relief carving on the face of Mount Behistun. It was carved by the order of the Persian king Darius I, also known as Darius the Great. Darius is considered to be a usurper to the Persian throne. He was not a descendant of Cyrus the Great, the earlier Persian king, who's famous for expanding the Persian Empire and taking over Babylon. He is also referred to in the Bible, famously being the king who allowed the exiled tribe of Judah to return to their homeland after decades of living in captivity in Babylon. Darius, who some people say I guess should be pronounced Darius, but I'm going to call him Darius. He was not a descendant of Cyrus the Great's royal lineage. However, he was a descendant of Achaemenes, or at least he claimed to be a descendant of Achaemenes, who was also the direct ancestor of Cyrus the Great. There is more than one account of how Darius was able to usurp the throne from his cousins, if they really even were his cousins, but ultimately he wanted to make sure his claim to the throne could be read by all clearly. So he didn't just write it down on paper or chisel it into tablets and pass them around. He had the message chiseled into the side of a mountain. It's also carved in a difficult-to-reach spot on the mountain, and I'm not sure, but I think he may have even gone so far as to have the area around the message chiseled down to make it even harder to get to, because I'm assuming he wanted to make it hard for someone to climb all the way up there and deface the message or try to change what it said. And like the Rosetta Stone, he had the message chiseled in 3 different languages: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. He wanted to make sure it could be seen by all and easily understood in their preferred language. Now, I think that's a lot more effective way of getting a message across and through time than just writing it down on some parchment. Darius ruled in the 500s BC, and thousands of years later you can still read his message on Mount Behistun. It's hard to read from a distance without binoculars, but it is there. The message is about his family lineage and the battles he was in. It is essentially ancient propaganda trying to justify his claim to the Persian throne, and wanted the people of his time to know, and future generations too. And, at least up until modern times, people wouldn't have had an effective method of removing this message from the mountain. I mean, I don't know, maybe someone could have catapulted boulders at it or something like that, but I'm not sure exactly how high up in the mountain the relief is to know that if that would have even been possible, or how effective it could be. The relief does actually have some damage on it now, but I think it is modern bullet damage from sometime during World War II. Despite the modern damage, the text is still mostly readable, I think, if you know how to read those old languages. Fortunately today, not everyone needs to know how to read one of those languages, because there are people that do know how to read it and have translated it into other modern languages. I think regardless of whether you like Darius or you don't like him, you've got to give it to him on this one. He found a very effective way to make sure future generations knew who he was, or at least who he wanted us to think he was. Find a difficult-to-reach spot on the mountain, carve your message there, and carve it in multiple languages. Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.